Hi, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive. I'm a coach for highly sensitive people and empaths. And I'm coming to you from sunny Holland right now, where I live. If you didn't know that, I live in the Netherlands. And today I want to talk about the waves of change and the different kinds of wave riders that there are. So you can see which one you are. And I'm also going to talk about which one is best to be as a highly sensitive person and why, and give you some tips on how to become that way in dealing with changes. Okay, so the first type is the anticipator. This is the person who sees changes coming. This is not the same as somebody who worries and frets all the time, by the way, right? Because if you're worrying and fretting, you're always like expecting the worst, and also about things that may not actually happen. But when you're an anticipator, you start to see trends and developments. You start to see, oh, this is going in this direction. It may still be a small thing. It might not be very, very visible and very obvious, but you start to see the trends. Highly sensitive people actually have a natural ability to be an anticipator because you notice things when they're still small, right? So when you take the anxiety and the fear out of it that some people really have, and you just look at kind of the natural highly sensitive traits, which are that you notice subtle things more than others, it means you can spot trends early. This means you can be an anticipator, which means that if you have learned to take action based on your own observations, you take your own observations seriously, you can always be ahead of the big waves. So there's a small wave coming, in the ocean, and you can see it coming, and you're like, oh, there's a small wave coming, so I need to make some adjustments. Maybe I need to put my little beach gear a little bit higher up on the beach. In real life, you've got this little wave coming and change coming. You just start to prepare. You think ahead, like, oh, this is coming. It's not there yet. It's not happening tomorrow, but I can see this coming down the pipeline. I'm going to start thinking about what I'm going to do. I'm going to start taking action so that when that wave hits and when it's bigger, because it starts small, it gets bigger, I will have already resolved that. It won't actually become a problem. So if you're an anticipator, to other people who are not, it can seem like you're really lucky. Like bad things don't happen to you, and you just have a really easy life. You don't have any big problems, It can seem really unfair, but it's not unfair. It's just because you're anticipating and you're taking action early. Years ago, when I worked as an assistant professor, I had a colleague who was always struggling with getting the grading done on time, and a whole bunch of other things too. Anything with a deadline, he was always running and trying to, working overtime, trying to get it done. And so it seemed really unfair, like, wow, this guy has a lot of stress and he's always so busy and he's always working so hard. But then, I started to notice that, yeah, that was just before and just after the deadline, because he was always trying to stretch the deadline as well, as I was asking for extensions. But then in the middle of, a project, term, or just a term of teaching, he would be not very busy, and he would just basically just kind of just chill. He would just be really chill, really lazy, not do anything. So he was just being really, really lazy much of the time, and then it's just around the deadline he was stressing out. He was never actually able to get everything done because he never anticipated, right? So when I started to see that, I didn't feel sorry for him anymore, because I was like, this is your choice, right? You could act early and do a lot of these things earlier, but instead he was always like putting off things until the very, very end. And then he would run around and be like, oh, I can't join this, I can't do that because I'm too busy grading. And I always got my grading done and other things done. Yeah, sometimes it would take a long time, to get it all done, because I was a new teacher and it took me longer to get everything organized sometimes because I just had to learn still. But I was anticipating, I was thinking ahead. I was like, okay, we've got this done now. I've got a little bit of time. What's coming down the pipeline? What do I need to hand in a month from now? What else will I be doing and busy with that needs to get done? And will I have time to do it all, or can I do some of this already? How can I prepare for what's coming? Right? So I was always kind of thinking ahead of like, how do I avoid these big waves of stress crashing down on me? Because I would just rather deal with it early so that when the deadline comes, I've already handed it in 2 weeks ago, if possible. So that's really what this video is about, like these different stages, these different kinds of ways of dealing with stress and problems. And I think if you're used to putting things off, you might not realize that there's a different way to do things, or you may not think is possible for you, but it really is just a habit, and it's just a mindset. It's taking those small waves seriously and saying that small wave is going to become a big wave. I'm going to deal with it now because I'm doing this for my future self, right? I want to take some load off of her back, and I'm going to do it now because now it's easy. Now I've got time. Now there's no stress, and then I won't have it on my plate further down the line. Okay, so that was the first one, the Anticipator. Okay, next we have the Positive Procrastinator. So this is somebody who keeps putting things off until it gets annoying, but they do take action in time before things become a real crisis, right? So this colleague I was talking about, he was not a positive procrastinator because he would really wait until the very, very last minute or even beyond that to even get started, right? So a positive procrastinator just kind of waits until the waves are a little bit bigger and until they start to feel like, okay, this is really going to be annoying, and they start to kind of feel a little bit the effects of this wave that's coming, of this change, and they start to get annoyed by it. They're like, I don't feel good about this. Let's do something about it, and they take action, right? So their recurring pattern is that they go through changes when things get annoying, things get in their face. But they don't wait until things have been screaming in their face for months. It's more like they can maybe they can see something coming. They can maybe see the small wave, but they ignore it. But then when the wave gets bigger, when the problem gets bigger, when the person they're dealing with gets more annoying, when the problem gets more annoying, then they're like, okay, I'm gonna resolve this. So their peaks of regular stress are annoyance. It's not a huge deal, but there's if you're in this kind of space, if you're this kind of personality, you get annoyed more, because you're like, oh, this is so annoying, I'm going to do something about it. But you don't get super stressed a lot because usually you take action when things are annoying. So it's a small wave, but it's or medium-sized wave. Okay, so this is a positive procrastinator. Now there's also the negative procrastinator, and the negative procrastinator waits to take action until the wave is like really big and crashes on top of them. Okay, so this is when it really, really is a problem and you're already suffering the consequences of the problem quite severely before you take action. So they're standing on the beach, they see the small wave, they ignore it. They see the medium wave, they ignore it. And the huge wave is actually crashing on them, and then they're like, oh, well, now I got to do something, right? So the negative procrastinator may or may not be reacting in time to actually solve a problem, right? Because the problem has already happened. So depending on what the problem is, you may still be able to stop it from repeating itself. But it's also possible that a lot of problems happen to you and it's like too late because it's already happened and it's just a one-time thing and now it's happened. So a really important distinction between the positive procrastinator and the negative procrastinator is like how long they wait to take action. Do you wait until you're annoyed and it's usually, it's early enough to actually do something about it? Or do you wait until it's like inevitable that this thing is going to happen and it's already happening to you and then you're like, oh, I got to do something. Okay, so yeah, negative procrastinator is going to feel negative a lot of the time because they're like, oh, my life, there's constantly these waves crashing on top of me. There's like problem after problem just like coming at me. And so this feeds also kind of a negative mindset of, I have no control, I have no power, life is unfair, life's just happening to me. But it really has to do a lot with timing and preparation. So we have the Anticipator, the Positive Procrastinator, the Negative Procrastinator, and the next one is the Deadset Denier. So this is the person who just keeps denying that the wave exists. Small wave, they ignore it. Middle wave, they ignore it. Big wave crashing down on them. Oh, they're fine. I'm fine. Nothing is happening to me. Everything is just peachy. They just keep going as normal. And so they completely ignore problems. And this may seem really like crazy when you're thinking about a beach with waves, but our usual problems as people are usually emotional. Right? Our problems have to do with things that make us feel a lot of emotion. And so the Deadset Denier is really good at suppressing their feelings. So when things get really bad in their life, or somebody else might cry or scream or yell or get really scared, They're just like, I'm fine. They just refuse to acknowledge the problem. They refuse to look at it. They refuse to let it affect them, right? And this may be kind of a leftover from dealing with trauma, like a way to deal with, if you grew up with a lot of trauma in your childhood, one of the ways you learn to deal with it, can be that you just learn to push it away, pretend it doesn't exist. Could also be for other reasons, right? This is not the only reason people do this, but this can be a reason. You just kind of push it all down because you're like, oh, I'm not going to let this get to me. I refuse to let this get to me. But then the problem is you also don't acknowledge the issue. And so the issue then can keep growing and can keep affecting you. And you're fighting this battle really with the issue, but you're fighting it on the inside. Because part of you is being affected and part of you is getting hurt and part of you is losing hope. But you refuse to acknowledge the problem and you refuse to acknowledge how this is affecting you. And so what actually happens is you end up pushing down and ignoring and abandoning a part of yourself. So like long term, this is never a healthy strategy because you become divided against yourself. You lose touch with yourself, with part of yourself. And you start to identify more and more with ideas of who you want to be and how you want to be, and less with how you really are and how life is truly affecting you. So the Deadset Denier is common, but it's not a healthy way to be. And long term, it's a dangerous strategy to take because you numb yourself out. You numb yourself out from life and you numb out from getting to know yourself, getting to understand yourself, respecting yourself and loving yourself and being there for yourself. Okay, now there's one more after the Deadset Denier. Let me just look at my notes. So this is the Tsunami Zombie. The Tsunami Zombie, if you imagine a tsunami washing away a whole city, the Tsunami Zombie person will just keep going to the stores that no longer exist to buy the groceries that are no longer available because they refuse to adjust their routine because they have decided this is how I live my life and the whole world around me can fall apart and they just ignore it. Now, obviously, this is very unhealthy. This is a very kind of disconnected state to be in. And in the case of a city, an actual city disappearing, this looks really crazy, right? But again, like usually this is psychological. And you might see people like this in the workplace where, the workplace is going through an organization and things are changing. And there's just a few people who just refuse to make any adjustments. And even though, the old system is no longer working, they keep using the old system. Even though nobody is responding to the old ways anymore, they keep doing things according to the old ways. So the Tsunami Zombie is super, 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 super stubborn. And now stubbornness in itself is not a bad trait because sometimes you need to be stubborn. Sometimes people around you are doing something else and you need to persist at your idea. But where the Tsunami Zombie is different is that they just refuse to see reality. They're living in their own little world and anything that, is true inside their own little world is what they cling to and that's the only thing they're willing to acknowledge. Even if it's a blatant lie or a complete fantasy, they just keep plodding along according to that inner idea that they have. Okay, so at the beginning of this video, I said I was going to talk a little bit about which of these types is best to be for a highly sensitive person. Now, highly sensitive person means that you're one in about 5 people who is stressed out more quickly. That's not the whole thing. There's more to it than that. There's also benefits to being highly sensitive, but on the downside, it means you get stressed more easily than other people. And so it really helps if you can limit the amount of stress you go through. How do you limit the amount of stress? You keep the waves in your life as small as possible. Now, there's 2 ways to do that. There's a healthy way and there's an unhealthy way. The healthy way is to practice being really real about what is truly happening, what are you truly feeling, what is truly going on around you, and spotting the trends, spotting the small waves early, and seeing them for what they are and saying, oh, this is now a small wave, but it's going to get bigger because it's there and it keeps going, so it's going to grow. So I can start thinking about how I am going to adjust to this small wave so that by the time it gets big, I've already made all the adjustments and arrangements I needed to make, and I can basically I don't even have to think about the wave. It's already taken care of. This is a great way to lower your stress. solve problems early. And this especially applies to emotional problems, meaning when something starts to catch your attention and something starts to feel a little bit wrong, something starts to feel a little bit off. That's when you start paying attention. That's when you start making some changes. Like, this feels a little bit off. This feels a little bit wrong. This doesn't feel quite right, right? And it doesn't mean you start obsessing about things being perfect. It just means that if there's a persistent, recurring, this feels off, it doesn't feel right, this is changing, a sense that like this used to be like this, it used to be good, but now it's changing, it doesn't feel good anymore, that you start thinking about what can I do? How can I adjust and prepare, right? And then chances are by the time the situation gets pretty bad, you already have your strategy ready. You don't have to worry about it. So that keeps your stress levels much, much lower. But on the flip side, you're going to look like someone who maybe worries about nothing. Like, people around you might say, what are you worried about? Like, nothing's actually happening. I don't see a problem. I don't see a wave. You're like, no, there's like tiny ripple over there. And it's persistent. Oh, it's just a tiny ripple. Who cares about tiny ripples? Just ignore the tiny ripple, right? But what's really important to understand as a highly sensitive person is you have a lesser capacity to deal with big stress than some other types of people. There's some people are like a tank. They can just kind of plow through a lot of problems in life and they're not that affected. As a highly sensitive person, you are very, very subtly affected by a lot of things, which means that for you, that little wave is relevant, is important. Because if you always wait for it to get big, then you get stressed out a lot, right? It affects you more than it does other people, so you have to take action early. Now, I also said there's an unhealthy way to try to limit stress, right? This is suppressing, pushing down your feelings, pretending you're fine when you're not. This is, in your head saying, like you're anxious and you're unhappy, and you're stressed out, and then in your head you're like, I'm calm, I'm calm, I'm calm. You're trying to override what's really happening. You're not interested in investigating. You're not like curious about why do I feel this way, what's going on. You're just trying to like push it away, smooth it out, get rid of it as soon as possible. This is the unhealthy way because the little wave is still there and it's still getting bigger. And then what's going to happen is it's going to surprise you because you are saying in your head, I'm calm, I'm calm, I'm calm. And then suddenly this huge wave crashes on top of you. And now you can no longer deny that you're actually very scared. Now, like I said, for some people, they need the really big wave to realize anything is happening at all, right? They're less sensitive in that way, and that is totally fine, and that totally works for them. And that means that they're going to ignore all the little waves, and they're only going to take action when something's really big. But those big things don't shake them up the way it shakes you up. That's the difference. And that's why, for highly sensitive people, it's really beneficial when you learn to take action early. Okay, so I said I would give you some tips that if you're more of a procrastinator, how you can become someone who actually spots the small waves early and starts taking action early. Okay, so the first thing is to make time to sort through your day and sort through your perceptions. Take at least 15 minutes every day to just kind of sit quietly or have a cup of tea and just kind of ponder what has happened today, how have I been feeling, what really upset me, like what's going on? Because you may think that you will just notice that anyway, but when you have a lot going on, those perceptions and feelings tend to kind of be pushed aside, right? Because you're busy, you're doing something, you're focused on something else. And so a lot of what your body is registering and what you're emotionally registering and what you're going through, what you're experiencing is not necessarily unpacked automatically. You have to make time to unpack it and to actually understand like, oh, yeah, I was really annoyed about that. What's going on with this? And then, oh, actually, I've been getting annoyed about that for like a few weeks now. Maybe, yeah, that's a small wave, right? Like you start to see there's a pattern, there's a recurring something. And right now it's just annoyance. But I know if I don't deal with it, it's going to get bigger. So the first thing is making that time to notice. The second tip is a mindset shift. It's really easy to convince yourself that it's perfectly fine to ignore things when they're still small. Now, I don't mean to say that you should get worked up about every little thing, right? I'm talking about patterns. recurring small things that keep going, keep repeating, keep coming back, that are gonna get bigger because that's what they do. So the mindset shift is to say, hey, these recurring things that are still small, I can still ignore them now. But if I take this seriously now and think of, really deal with, how do I feel about this? What is this bringing up for me? What can I do? How can I anticipate where this is going to lead? If I do that work now, it's going to save me a lot of stress further down the road. That is just a decision. It's just a mindset shift. It's something to just accept and say, I am not going to be able, I cannot make the small wave go away. I cannot make this disappear magically. It is happening. And what I can do is deal with it early so that it doesn't create a big amount of stress in my life. And it probably will just kind of smoothly, move on by because I've actually just really anticipated it and dealt with it early. So what this means is doing away with wishful thinking. And it also means really getting clear on what are you feeling and having the guts to feel all your feelings. Because we all have preferences and we all have feelings that we're better with and the ones that we really don't like and we really don't want to deal with that particular feeling. It's like, I don't like that one. So the ones where you're like, I don't like that one, I don't want to feel that way, those are the ones that are going to alert you to small waves that you're going to miss if you don't acknowledge and deal with the feelings. Okay, because every feeling is actually a sign, is telling you about something important, something that's going on. And if you are like, I don't like that feeling, I don't want to feel it, then you don't receive the message. And then you cannot act early. If you're thinking, well, I have messages, feelings, like what are you talking about? I have a whole section in the Happy Sensitive library on different difficult emotions, what they're really trying to tell you, what they're really about, and ways and strategies for dealing with them. Because this has been a journey for me too. I grew up in a family where feelings were basically not acknowledged at all. And so I never really grew up with a clear understanding of that your feelings are valid and that they're meaningful and that they're trying to tell you something. I had to learn that and figure that out along the way and really study all my different emotions and try to understand, what is this energy really doing? What is it trying to do? And how is it trying to get me to change? And then start to see patterns and start to realize, oh, every time this feeling comes along, it has this kind of quality, has this kind of energy, this kind of tendency. It's trying to get me to do this. It's trying to get me to do that. And I started to see patterns in that. And I started to see it's the same for me as it is for clients. And so that is what I put into the Happy Sensitive library on making difficult emotions, difficult feelings easier. So explaining that to you, because even though explaining it and just listening to an explanation is not the same as feeling it, I mean, I can't do the work for you. It does help your mind. It does help your brain when you understand this annoying, scary, overwhelming feeling has a purpose and is trying to help me. And I can tell you right now it's trying to help you, but every feeling is different. Every feeling has a different purpose. So when you have a better sense of what that purpose is and how it's trying to help you, it'll help you calm down and be willing to just really look at and feel that feeling without worrying so much about it, because you start to realize, oh, this is something that's trying to help me, but I'm just unfamiliar with it. Yeah, so that the emotional part is really important for being able to deal with little waves early, because the little waves announce themselves through your feelings. That's the thing. That's how they let you know that something's changing, through your feelings. When the situation gets really big, it becomes physically visible, right? So that's when it gets really big. But that's also when you have very little time before it starts crashing down on you. So this is actually, if you want to catch the small waves early, you got to work with your emotions. You got to work with your intuition on this. It gives you the time that you need. You get the time that you need to anticipate and make changes, but only when you listen early. All right, if you're listening to this and you're like, wait, but I realize now that I wait really long to take action. I'm always procrastinating, and that's why I'm stressed so much. First of all, that is a really big, important insight, right? Because it means that you can actually start taking control of that particular kind of stress, because you can learn to just take action earlier, and it will make your life easier. And the second thing is that, this is a skill that you can learn, but it is something you will just need to practice. So don't beat you up about it. Don't blah. So don't beat yourself up if you're someone who takes action really late. Chances are this is just a pattern in your family. This is what you learned. This is just what you got used to doing. And just realize, oh, there's a different way to do this. What does it take? It takes taking your, small observations that, when things are just not that big of a deal yet, taking that seriously, getting really attuned to your feelings, and, learning how to do that. And if you're like, I don't know where to start or how to do that, I have resources, self-study resources in the Happy Sensitive Library, but I'm also happy to work on that with you in person. And for that, start with setting up a clarity call so we can talk. All right, I hope this was helpful. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye. Okay, so this is the library page that you see when you go to the link. And it just has a little bit of information about, what the library is. And I'm just going to scroll down to an overview of all the resources to show you where a lot on difficult feelings, because I really believe for highly sensitive people, it's so important to understand your feelings. What are they trying to tell you? This is such a big part of your drive, like what actually makes you tick is your feelings. And many of us just never had that education because our parents were clueless and our schools were clueless, and everybody says just push on, just shove it aside and keep going. And that really doesn't work. Like, you really need to get connected with and understand your feelings. And so in this series, I talk about all these tough, negative feelings. What are they really about? How are they trying to help you? Because once you understand that, it's much easier to actually connect with those feelings. See you there.